Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, coast to coast, wherever you may be. Welcome to another episode of Shots from the Winchester Podcast, brought to you by Greencastle Consulting. I'm your host, Al Green, and today is a special episode because we also have a co-host today, Paul Ashley. Together, we're going to be talking to Craig Henzel, who is the managing director at Accenture. He's also a vetrepreneur, which is something that we're going to get into later on, because I'm sure if you haven't heard of what a vetrepreneur is, you're going to learn about it today. So give us a little bit about your background as a managing director.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I specialize in the chief financial officer and enterprise value area, and so I mainly do work with large clients you've heard of before in that area. So driving value for them, understanding what their needs are, over delivering against what their requirements are, and I've been with them for roughly 8 months. Came over from a competitor named Genpact, and they bought the management consulting business that a couple of us started when we left AstraZeneca together.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Nice. Now, not to get off subject, but you're also an author.
I am.
Yeah.
Yes. And in fact, that was part of what Paul and I were talking about, and maybe worth kind of sharing now, but wrote a book called Leadership from the Front Lines. It's 10 principles on leadership. It's got a corporate and a military example of each principle. But, you know, when you get to be, I'm going to say this seasoned, maybe kind of this gray, you've probably done a lot of things in your life. And so that's what that is. It's kind of my life's work and what I've been able to kind of gather from people that I've learned from a tremendous amount. And then, you know, learning how to first follow and then move into increasingly kind of large leadership roles. So it's, I released it just before Christmas in 2022, so we'll call it kind of 7 months ago. And I had done a couple of podcasts with it, and it ended up jumping up to number 1 in 8 different categories, became an Amazon bestseller and an international bestseller.
Wow.
And I think it's still available for a free download on Amazon if you have Kindle Unlimited, I think.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
That's
but
cool.
all the net proceeds go to solving veteran homelessness.
Wow.
I don't make a thing from it, and it's a straight pass-through.
Now, that's another part of the conversation that we're going to get into, veteran homelessness. Now, you make a mission about that.
Do.
Yeah. And that's another thing, especially since we're talking about veterans, obviously, we want to get into a bit of your background as far as being in the military.
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about your military career. Maybe tell us a little bit why you chose to do the book under that condition, under those circumstances.
Sure. So I was an officer in the Coast Guard. Spent 4 years at the Coast Guard Academy. That was how I entered the Coast Guard, and then 26 years combined active duty and reserve. And you know, the early part of the career, you know, you're a young officer, you don't know anything. You're learning from folks who have been around for forever. Paul's very familiar with that, certainly in a seagoing service. And so you've got people that are senior petty officers and chief petty officers that are in your department, in your division, and technically you're supposed to be leading, but you're learning a tremendous amount from them. So, you know, it's kind of as you graduate and you become an ensign, the first CO, the first commanding officer that I was happy enough to kind of be mentored by, said, ensigns should be seldom seen, never heard, and always vigilant. And that kind of worked for me because, you know, if you just kind of lean forward and take care of your people, make sure they're being developed. And if there's an issue, you take a couple rounds in the chest for them. And when there's, you know, accolades or gaccolades to be spread around, it goes to them, right? And you step out of the way and you make sure that they've done the great work. They get the accolades as a result. But, you know, just went to a couple of ships back to back and progressed through. Came back to Coast Guard headquarters. I did drug law enforcement in the beginning. One of the drug busts I have is a 60 Minutes episode back in the mid 90s. But did some great things, you know, based on a ship in Portsmouth, Virginia, and then another one in Honolulu, Hawaii. Now I'm reaching back a few years, so I've got to think, you know. but then came to Coast Guard headquarters. I ran the operations budget for the Coast Guard globally.
Wow.
And then screened for command, got orders to a ship, go back down, kind of fight the drug war, based in Roosevelt Roads, Puerto Rico, a Navy base. Coast Guard uses Navy bases all the time, as a tenant kind of command. And then had a family situation, needed to lock down some geographic stability, got out of the Coast Guard, and then went into, was finance director at General Electric, senior director at Johnson & Johnson, group controller there. I went to a kind of a senior leadership role in finance with Merck, kind of a senior director, VP role, and then was VP of Finance Division CFO at AstraZeneca.
Wow.
And then in between there, not to lengthen this thing out too much, but I got directly into the reserves. So I got off of active duty in '99 and spent a couple of years at GE, and then all of a sudden, September 11th happened.
Yeah.
I was in the greater DC area, and I got drawn back in full-time, spent a year at the Pentagon in the Expeditionary Warfare Office. The only Coast Guard guy, kind of an 04 at the time, lieutenant commander, filling an 05 billet and reporting to two Navy captains who were absolutely phenomenal. I talk about them in the book a bit, and did some great work in a short period of time to serve the country, essentially, and make sure the folks overseas were at kind of the pointy end of the spear. Those guys were well equipped, we'll say, and I was alongside non-lethal weapons and explosive ordnance disposal and the Navy SEAL program, and was on the Naval Coastal Warfare program, and it was a difficult time, but a great time. A lot of roadblocks were cleared out of the way, and we were able to just get work done.
That's awesome.
It is, and so we picked that up later. But as I got out of the Coast Guard active duty and went into General Electric, Johnson & Johnson, Merck, AstraZeneca, and then three of us left together, CIO, senior procurement person. We left together and started a business. We sold it 20 months later.
Wow.
To this former division of General Electric called Genpact. And to kind of bring this thing full kind of circle, and to why the book, and if you look at the back cover of it, talks about, I'm on a kind of a mission to solve veteran homelessness. Some of the work that I did when I was at Genpact was up in Chicago with Kraft Heinz, consumer packaged goods company, great company. But I would walk from the hotel down into kind of the center, already in Chicago, but walk down and take probably a mile and a half or so. But I'd be passing folks on the street all the time, and it was like 6:30, 6:45 in the morning.
Yeah.
And I passed by a number of folks who had been out all night. And these are in the months of November, December, January, February. You don't want to do that
cold out there,
in Chicago, yeah? So anyway, long story short, ended up noticing that a couple of these folks were laying on cardboard boxes saying homeless veteran. So as I'm kind of moving into the center of Chicago, overlooking Millennium Park, there's certain streets you don't want to go down because the wind is just horrible. These folks, thank goodness, weren't there, but they were tucked into kind of little nooks and crannies of buildings and had been out all night. And so I started trying to introduce myself originally to some of these guys. And initially you get kind of that, if someone's, just waking up or they've been asleep for all night on the street, they're looking at you like, I was offering, hey, you want to grab, there's a McDonald's right up the street.
Yeah.
You want a coffee or a breakfast sandwich or something like that? And in the beginning, people look at you like, what kind of game you're running?
Yeah, what's behind all this?
Exactly. And so, it was cold enough. So I was just, all right, brother, listen, I can't stand here and talk to you. I'm freezing. I know you're cold. You've been out all night. I got to go to work, but I'll catch you later. And so I started passing by some of these folks 2-3 times during the first couple of weeks, and
They're getting used to you now.
Yeah, and then finally I said, you're laying on a cardboard sign that says homeless veteran. If that's true, if you're a veteran, I'm a veteran, how about just two veterans go and kind of shoot the shit a little bit and grab some chow?
Right.
Yeah? How's that sound? And finally, one guy goes, all right. And so I said, yeah, I'll cover breakfast for you. Get a sandwich, get another one, put it in your pocket, give it to a friend, whatever, get some coffee, get a refill, do what you need to do. What are you guys doing out here?
Yeah.
And so it started growing into like a group of guys that would flow into this McDonald's. Whatever these guys want, they'd order, we'd sit down, and I'm dressed like this. These guys have been out all night. They look a little haggard, but some of the stories were similar in that as they were leaving active duty, they had some issues, whatever, maybe some substance abuse, maybe some PTSD, and it was difficult for them to either get a job or hold a job. And so I thought, there's got to be a way.
Yeah.
And I didn't put it together until COVID happened, and I said, I need to finish this book. I've had a outline that I've been kind of tuning up for a number of years here. Maybe I can take whatever proceeds come from this and just pour it towards veteran homelessness. So I started doing some research. We got 60,000 people, and the number kind of fluctuates year in and year out. But 60,000 people who are spending the night, every night, on the street. Yeah, nationwide. Wow. But it gets worse, Al. It's like 1.4 million are at risk.
Wow.
Yeah.
See, these are the numbers you don't hear about.
You don't. But they're on the surface if you just Google it. Some of it was a few years ago, but 60,000 is a pretty recognized number.
Yeah.
With 1.4 million at risk, and I thought, these people have been bleeding red, white, and blue for the country.
Yeah.
They make everything else happen for this country, projecting power overseas, whatever we need to do. So we need to solve this thing, and I think I've got a couple of ideas around it, using some kind of tiny home, container home, and kind of that movement, and getting people transitioned in, helping them out, bringing care to one place, and then having them transition into their own place. So it's kind of it's a transitory type thing, stay as long as you need, but once we've solved it, then you've got these pretty swank looking kind of apartments that any community, any city would love.
That's amazing. That's something that you don't hear. Those numbers you just don't hear about. Where did the United States fail? Where have we failed to have this many homeless veterans and that many on deck, potentially? Yeah.
It's a great question. I'm not sure I know the root cause of it, but I can postulate a little bit. We've got hundreds of thousands of folks who are active duty or reserve, and as they transition out, their issues aren't getting solved at the root. And so sometimes, there's whether it's a man or a woman who's leaving the service, there's a feeling of kind of invincibility. Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah.
You got a back issue? Not all of a back issue. I'm fine. Yeah, I'm good to go. I'm ready, fit for full duty.
Endorphins are still popping.
I can deploy.
Yeah,
because you don't want to be put on a list like that unless you've got a real serious disability that's going to prevent you, and then, then it's a medical issue. But kind of like on the surface, I think folks who are servicemen and women get used to dealing with, I've got a back issue, I've got an ankle issue, my knee, it's banged up for however it's happened. And
like sports athletes.
Almost. You're just
put
kind
me
of
back in the game, coach.
Playing through the pain.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to like discharge, and folks are leaving the service, you're supposed to take a physical, right, that allows you to be discharged. And I don't know if full disclosure happens. People are, lots of times when they're ready to leave the service, they're like ready to leave. Okay, well, I got to get this physical done. All right, let's go quickly. How's everything? The doctor asks you, how you feeling? Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, I'm good. How, you've deployed several times. How are you? How are you feeling kind of emotionally? Yeah, I'm fine.
They're just washing over it. They're not really digging into it.
I think so. And then what ends up happening is things catch up with folks, or issues that have been lying dormant end up they come to the fore. And then, there's still a whole bunch of Vietnam veterans who are out there on the street. There are a lot of different organizations that are helping. I don't know that it's a great coordinated effort.
Right.
I saw the MacArthur Foundation a couple of years ago set aside maybe $500 million for homelessness. I don't know how much the veterans get there. The VA Veterans Administration, as we've seen, is kind of undergone a huge revamping here in the U.S. After long wait times and queue times for folks to get seen, and there was even some articles around how some of the metrics are being adjusted to make a dashboard look better than it was in reality. I don't know how much of that is true, but the VA's gone through a huge revamping. So kind of two things. One is folks who are out there need food now. They need shelter now, they need food. 2 Veterans Days ago, in the parking lot of the VA hospital in Philadelphia, teamed up with a group of folks, Team Red, White, and Blue. Great. They've got chapters all over the United States. I'm a member of the Philadelphia chapter. They had probably 10, 12, 15 volunteers out there. And we teamed up with another group, and we put together a 150,000 meal food drop.
Wow.
In the parking lot there.
Wow.
And so for folks we couldn't distribute food to, we went out and filled up the food banks in the kind of the greater tri-state area, Pennsylvania, Southeast PA, Jersey, Delaware. We still have active duty folks who are living at or below the poverty line. They've got 2, 3, 4 children. You're talking about an E3 and E4. Whoever the service member is deploys. The other kind of partner is left to take care of kids, and so there's the food aspect, and then there's kind of the how do we get folks up into a home of their own, and I see it as a kind of a 2-phase process. But I've partnered up, kind of the vetrepreneur side of me has partnered up with a group called Giant Container, and they've got some phenomenal ideas around communities of container homes, tiny homes, stackable, right? Containers like you see on container ships that can withstand, whatever weather at sea. And getting, maybe it's 10 across and 5 down or something, but putting these things in a place where you can get folks up off the street, bring care to a central location instead of scattered around everywhere. Figure out what the need is, address the need, and then move them into a kind of a permanent home of their own.
That's amazing. I worked with a group out in LA, and they're trying to get people off of the road, Skid Row,
Sure.
using the same techniques, using container homes, and they're building them, they're stacking them, they're making them into apartments.
Yes.
And I did a walkthrough, and they're amazing.
They are.
They're amazing, and the way that they stack them is very, very unique. It's like Jenga in a way.
Yes.
You're balancing out the size and everything like that, but then the exterior of it doesn't look like just like a freight car, like you would imagine. It's an exterior, like a home. Like you feel like you're in a home, and like the price of containers aren't that much. They're like $5,000 to $8,000 depending on the size of one, and cutting them out and constructing them like that. Absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for making that effort, especially seeing that there's a situation out there and bringing those numbers, especially our audience. A lot of them are veterans. A lot of them are business people as well. So I definitely want to get back into your book and talk about leadership and things like that. And Paul, you jumped into this book. Yeah. Also, I didn't mention this earlier, but Paul, you're from Royal Navy, so the two of you have some commonality when it comes to that.
We chatted about it.
Yeah. I'd like to hear about that, but I also like to maybe have that and then segue into the book a bit too.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I dived in, not just because I had a warship on the front and it was up my alley, but everyone feels they have a book in them, or maybe two or three, sort of
Yes.
thing. But
Yeah.
you know, the people that actually follow through on that and actually, you know, realize that dream, there's a process to it, right? So I think you had a great story about how this book came into being, because as we everything you're involved in, everything you do in terms of the corporate world and the veteran community, writing a book on top of this must have been a challenge. And I was interested if you could tell our audience about the process and how it all came about.
Sure. Yeah, it's a funny conversation that Paul and I had, but I don't know what maybe started. I thought, you know what, probably I need to get some things down on paper. And as I was traveling back and forth consulting, you know how when you're about 20 to 30 minutes out from touching down, the pilot comes on and goes, yeah, you know, we're about 20 minutes out. Or sometimes he or she will come on like 30 minutes out. In 10 minutes, we'll be 20 minutes out. So if you need to use the bathroom, please do it. And I would pick up my phone. At first, I started just kind of jotting down some notes. But then I started to try and make it digital, so it was just easier to carry with me. But on the last 20 minutes of each flight, going to a client, coming back from a client, I'd start to jot down, you know, things that I thought were worthwhile in terms of leadership lessons. Because I've made some horrible mistakes, and a bunch are in the book. And I've learned a lot as a result of those. So then I said, all right, well, you know, they weren't just kind of leaping off the page, but I thought, all right, maybe there's a top 10. And so I would, as I'd be working on the way to a client, I'd put my laptop away because you had to stow it anyway, and then I'd just be sitting there. And, you know, if I've already watched a movie or something, or I'm all done with that, I was like, okay, let's figure this thing out. So then I started writing some things, and then it started flowing very quickly. And then I thought, okay, here's like 10 principles. Let me try and put a corporate and a military example against each one. And so there are things like I've learned a tremendous amount from a number of folks in the Deepwater Horizon rig disaster down in the Gulf of Mexico when that blew up.
Wow.
I was sent offshore and said, okay, you're the senior guy, figure it out. And so I'm learning from a tremendous amount of civilians there. And I mentioned them in the book and the acknowledgement page, but you know, didn't know a thing about that, but had demonstrated some leadership before. So I was told to go offshore, lean into it, and do what you need to do. There's 127 ships. We're repositioning satellites. You've got overflights every day. Wow. And this was the worst oil spill in the history of the world.
Wow.
So, okay. And so I left actually Merck and then went down there. So I just started to kind of jot some of those things down. What did I learn from that?
Yeah.
I learned this, I learned not to do this, don't do that. And so I just started filling in examples and then thought, let's kind of assemble it together.
And that, I mean, that story itself, just the whole Deepwater Horizon episode is just a phenomenal story. And I love the way you sort of weave in the leadership lessons that are around it, and you've touched on a few there. But one of them I thought was really interesting, and you just mentioned you left Merck to go and do this.
Yes.
The piece about responding to the call and what you do when you get the call, sort of thing. So could you speak about that bit when you actually got that phone call?
Sure, yeah. It ended up happening, and it's kind of the first part of the book. But you hear about a situation, and when you're in the Coast Guard, if it's around the coast, and I was an 05 at the time, a commander, and you're in charge of a number of states where you've got reservists and you're deploying them and stuff, but then a big thing happens like that, there's probably going to be a call when it's something huge like that. You know, so an incident of national significance is what we call it. And so I try and get my PT done early in the morning. I come back from a run and I get a phone call, and it's not a number that I recognize, but you know it's not spam either. And it's coming from a couple of, one of two different locations where you know that there's a preponderance of military folks, right? So
basically, that's the red phone ringing.
Essentially, yeah, and it was someone kind of further up the chain of command and saying, is this Commander Henzel? Yes, it is. We need you downrange immediately. And, you kind of answer the call, right?
Yeah.
It's, yes, sir. And you've got a bag ready to go, and then you go do the mission. And,
Wow.
You inform your company, and then you go, and you figure things out later.
Yeah.
It's funny. Have you read? I think it's called Leadership as Language by David Marquette.
I haven't.
I was reading it the other day, and because it spurred me to go, sort of deeper into that story. And some of the lessons that came out, I'm sure there were thousands, but one of the interesting ones, I don't know if you're probably aware of it, is that when the gauges started to go off in the Deepwater Horizon, control room, the operators, although they did their initial sort of safe check, they didn't sort of pull the plug. They didn't sort of cut everything out, which would have saved a lot of time and spillage for them, because they didn't have the confidence, or they didn't have the trust to sort of hit that switch. They were waiting for their manager to give approval.
Yeah.
And of course, during that time, things got worse and worse and worse. And there's the investigation that bore that out, that said, look, if those people felt empowered to do that and trusted, they could have shut that down, significantly quicker. I think it was 9 minutes, but it was a hard 9 minutes,
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah, there's so many stories that sort of come out of that.
I think that if you lead from the front, you can solve a number of these issues right away. Much harder. I mean, if you're a general and it's the Civil War and you've got massive forces, maybe it makes sense for you to be back in some kind of command bunker and you're positioning troops. Okay, but things move so quickly now, that kind of, we'll say, approach doesn't work well in my mind. You don't know what's happening. You don't have your kind of ear to the ground. You don't know what's troubling your team. You don't have a real kind of pulse check on what's going on. So you need to be in there right up front, sleeves rolled up, and working with the team. Not micromanaging them, not doing that. If you're up there in front, then you create this slipstream where people can, from your team, they can join you, because you've already created this kind of vortex where you're pulling people with you. And Paul and I have talked before about kind of change management and bringing people along on the journey.
Yeah.
If you're not in the middle of things, what are you doing?
Yeah. It's like a shepherd has to smell like his sheep sometimes, as the quote goes.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is, in what you talk about again in the book, is about this situational awareness piece that the leader has, and the ability to sort of focus on, the strategic, but also take care of the important details.
It is a state of mind. It's almost like as you're, in my case, a young officer. I've been on a couple of ships as I went through the Coast Guard Academy, and then, okay, Craig, you're going to need to become the officer of the deck. You're going to need to have the deck and the con, and so you're going to need to understand things simultaneously. It's not kind of single piece flow here. Let's do one thing, do it really well, and then do another thing and do it really well. You need to do all of these things kind of simultaneously. It's not multitasking, but you've got an idea of what the radar picture is. You know the closest point of approach of any of the ships around you. You know what kind of the speed with which that's going to happen. Who's behind you, who's kind of approaching on either side, port or starboard, and what's right off the bow. And if you've got an intel picture that's happening, you need to fuse that in there as well. So, you've got multiple teams. How's the engine room? Are both engines up and running? Okay, are they doing any training on deck? So you're just you're not multitasking, you're still doing one thing, but you're kind of touching things very quickly. And so that one was an interesting kind of initial learning for me, because you want to do your best, and so you want to focus on one thing, but you can't do that. Not if you're going to be in charge of the entire ship.
Right.
So, you're fusing this picture together, your situational awareness, Paul, you're talking about. You go down, you take a round of the engine room. Okay, what's going on? How are things? What's the status of the plant? Okay, port and starboard engine looking good. Any issues there? And you're going back into the combat systems center. Do we have any contacts now that we're, pursuing? And as we were doing work down the Caribbean, late 80s, 90s, many times we're on a drug law enforcement mission. So you're in pursuit sometimes. So that one's kind of top of mind. Right. So and then when you get out into a kind of a consulting type project, you've got people and you've got resources and you've got multiple work streams. You've got the change management piece. How are we bringing the client along on the journey? And so you're continuously kind of fusing this picture together and honing the rough edges around your situational awareness. If you can't do that, you see some folks kind of deer in the headlights. You're not going to catch everything, but you need to be able to respond quickly. And then if you're not on the front lines and you're hearing about it second, third hand, then
it's hearsay in some way. Yeah, you don't really know the truth of that.
You don't. You don't. And when you need to be making a decision quickly, you can't wait a couple days for that.
And with so many touch points, you have to be able to trust the people that are in those positions, managing those elements for you.
Yeah.
In order to be the best in your command, you have to be able to know that the people that you're entrusting to do certain tasks are going to be there and doing the job right. And so that's another point, especially from the military into corporate offices, where you have so many different moving pieces, different people doing different tasks. Same thing.
Yes.
Coming out of the military and then coming into corporate, was there any feeling of a difference or transition? I know being in the military and then going into civilian world is a little different.
Lots of similarities. It's a good question, Al. And that's part of kind of when you're on the front lines, if you and I are working together and you're a work stream lead on a project, if I'm up front with you, not doing your job, but learning from you at the same time, you've got great deep skills in X. And so I'm learning a little bit from you and understanding your kind of capability and your ability to kind of bring the customer along on a journey and connect with them. Then, okay, then you've earned some respect, I'm not going to be with you all the time. Right. I don't need to be.
Right.
Again, it's not, I learn at the same time I'm evaluating, at the same time we're delivering. So it's a continuous flow. And so if you've got 6, 8 different work streams that are all going on at the same time, you're simultaneously doing the same thing. And then I think chapter 2 is around developing your people. You're developing folks real time all the time. So there's kind of the mentorship, which is the longer term piece. What do you want to do in the next 2 to 3 years? Do you feel like you have the skills? You want to be in charge of this. Well, that probably is going to take 6 different things. Looks like you've got 4 of them. Let's build a plan to get you the extra 2. Okay, the longer term mentorship, but then the coaching day to day. And I think that's a two-way street. So I'll ask the team after we present to a client or something, how do you think that went? And if I did 50% of it, I'm looking for where can I do better?
Right.
So the coaching and the mentoring, it's fused together. And I think as former military folks, we probably have a bit of a leg up because we've worked with small teams before. We understand how to get to the mission, which, as Paul and I have discussed, is very similar to what's the customer's requirement? What are their needs? What's the client need? Same thing as trying to meet the mission or exceed it. Bring it in a little faster, maybe under budget. Look for other value that we can provide.
In terms of the veteran transition piece that you were talking about, this notion of military precision, about the mission, and the mission is everything, and the mission is critical.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's where veterans really can excel, providing they transfer the right skills in terms of this whole implementation mindset.
Yes.
And again, it goes back to what we talk about situational awareness and focusing on the right things. So an implementation, as we said, it isn't just about the go live. It isn't just about the project management piece. There's the change management. There's the process improvement. There's
100%.
the budget. There's the scope. So being able to sort of, tap all these things, like going down in the engine room, just tap on these things, but never taking your mind off the bigger picture and the bigger focus, is a skill set that I think military people have an affinity for because they understand that importance of the mission and the military precision piece.
I completely agree, and it's a great analogy.
Yeah.
I'm 100% aligned with that. It's something that I think sometimes military folks don't recognize they have that ability.
Yeah.
They've just been doing it. You know, it's innate. It's kind of intuitive. Of course we meet the mission.
Yeah.
You know, there's an op order. We take a look at it. What do we need to do? Logistically, we pull together what we need. We train. We've been training all the time, kind of in a continuous mode, but now we're going to get very specific about this. And so, and all that stuff ports right over. And sometimes I'll talk with folks coming out of the service and go, man, you've got a lot to offer. And someone goes, yeah, I don't know. You know,
It's marketing, it's selling themselves. It's not
Yes.
something that the military do as a matter
Yeah.
of course, really. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And right, it's kind of selling to yourself first. Actually, I probably do have some skills here that work
Yeah.
that I could take straight over. I don't know corporate finance. I don't know corporate logistics. I've done logistics in whatever service. The idea of getting things from point A to point B,
Yeah.
on time or early, and you know, coordinating that, global supply chain. You know, so I think folks don't understand it until someone says, oh yeah, and almost takes a look at their body of work in the military and
Yeah.
goes, oh yeah, you'd be great, at these 5 things. Have you thought about them? And maybe the person's looked at one and go, no.
Right.
And so it's almost convincing them, you know, you're not coming out of the military with your hand out, Guy, could I please have a job?
Yeah.
No, you're like, actually, I've got some relevant skill here on top of the leadership and the loyalty and the commitment and the being able to be trained very quickly and adapting to an environment and being resilient. All those things that there's a huge discussion about here now that many folks don't have. Level of resilience?
Yeah.
How many times we've been told no in the military? Oh, I don't know. I can't even remember how many. But that means, in many cases, not yet. Like, we're not ready for that yet. Okay, good. Yeah, I'm going to keep it on the back burner, and we'll pull it out when it makes better sense.
Yeah.
I also love the fact that, you know, it's a complete, you know, sort of book in the sense that it doesn't sort of sugarcoat the failure aspect as well. Because part of leadership is that you're going to fail. It's a fact of life.
Yeah.
So you had an interesting sort of, you know, story about that. I mean, first off is leaders owning failure and, you know, owning it. It's on me. My team didn't, you know, fit the bill. So therefore I own it as the leader.
It's learning from it quickly, as quickly as possible. You know, there was, you know, call it 8-10 years ago, and I think there's still kind of a prevailing attitude sometimes where, you know, leaders at companies want innovation, so they want people to try things and fail a little bit. And so there was a theory around, well, let's celebrate failure. I'm not really in that camp because I'm more thinking along, all right, we spent the time to try and set this thing up properly. Something didn't work. So let's very quickly understand that and then pivot immediately into, you know, what we think is probably plan B or C. Because we didn't go in with just kind of one plan. You walk in with, all right, if this doesn't work, and there are more colorful ways to say that, right? But if this thing doesn't work, then we're going to need to be very agile and adapt quickly. And so turning that thing super fast, learning from it incredibly quick, and then moving on is probably my... I never really took things personally, even though some of them were very personal failures. I always try to figure out, where's the nugget in there that I completely missed? Because I need to figure that out, or I'm going to miss it again.
Yeah.
And so I have pretty open kind of after action kind of conversations with people, and I think sometimes they've been used to, I'm going to give you, you know, hey Craig, I'd like to give you some feedback. I never start with that. That's like it's like way to shut somebody down.
Yeah.
But I'll ask for feedback. Hey, how do you think that went? I think it went, again, more colorful ways, but I think that went very poorly. And I'm owning that one. What do you think? And the person goes, and when they know that you're being sincere, they go, in the beginning, they're trying to check to see if you're sincere.
Yeah.
Like, really? Well, how do you think it went poorly? And you go, well, I didn't do this, or this, and something wasn't connecting. What did I miss?
Right.
And when the person really realizes, oh, he's looking for some real feedback. Yeah, you're probably right. That didn't go well. I'm not sure what we could have done better, but let's sit down and talk about it quickly, because if we're going to be doing this for the next 6 months, 9 months, a year, whatever, we're going to need to solve this thing like now.
Yeah.
So there's a speed with which I think it needs to get done.
Yeah. That's one of those interesting questions. It's the phrasing, right? So you said, can I give you some feedback? I mean, you could rephrase it on a scale of 1 to 5. How do you think that went, or something like that? And then that's kind of a less, sort of pressured question. It's then it invites sort of honest feedback in that way. The formula I was trying to point you towards was this whole concept, the lather, rinse, repeat.
Oh, the lather,
concept.
rinse, repeat.
So I read that and I thought, my mind went back to, we're old sailors, right? So my mind went back the scrubbing deck day, the sailors scrubbing decks.
Yeah.
And the acronym was SARD, S-A-R-D, soak, agitate, rinse, dry. So I thought, is this going to be about cleaning ships, or is it going to be about leadership here, something? But I love the way you use that sort of combination of words. So you just sort of talk about what that means, lather, rinse, repeat.
Sure, of course. So the whole idea of kind of lather, rinse, repeat was something that, you did it with new product development. You would go quickly, you'd put together a formula, you'd get a focus group. If the focus group went well, great. It's the whole kind of minimum viable product, minimum viable experience. You either persevere on the same path, or you pivot quickly. The Eric Ries book about lean startups. And so the whole lather, rinse, repeat piece, I realized we use that in the military all the time. If it worked well, you just replicate it quickly. Let's keep going. If not, quick kind of after action lessons learned. What happened? Okay, not the symptom level, but the root cause. And so sometimes you need to drill upstream there to figure out, all right, what was the actual root cause? All right, let's never do that again, or how do we solve for that? And so we try and find where things started to go off the rail, and you do that quickly so that you can lather, rinse, repeat, and just, kind of play to your strengths all the time.
One of the things that I feel like is a strong point of view that we just got here, and something that we also do a lot here on this podcast, talking about leadership especially, is talking about failure and how to grow from failure. Because I feel like we celebrate our wins, we learn from our failures. And the failures that we have inform who we are character-wise, as well as moving forward as a leader. And being able to understand and learn from that and then grow into that is, I think, the best and the strongest way to perform as a leader, because you have to own those things. You have to own those failures, and you have to also be able to show that you can move forward from that as well.
Yes.
As a leader, and you've been a prolific leader. You've been in Merck. You've been at Johnson & Johnson. Accenture. The military. You're high
I've
level.
made a lot of mistakes, Al. Yeah. It's the way I look at that.
High level. And so that's something that the people that listen to this podcast, they're doing this. They're doing these things. They're learning from these things. They're learning from mistakes.
Sure.
How do you tell somebody that it's okay to fail? It's okay to fail. It's okay to grow and learn from that.
Yeah. You know what?
And any leadership lesson that you might be able to give someone.
From failure, or just in general?
In general.
Okay.
In general, yeah.
So the first part first, and it's kind of two-pronged maybe, but the only reason why there's probably a book here is because I've failed so many times. But if you're not kind of on, we'll say, the pointy edge, or maybe not the bleeding edge, but on the edge of trying to kind of continuously innovate, do something new. If you just shifted back into neutral and you're just kind of in a low gear maybe, and you're just kind of coasting along and kind of staying in the middle of the road, you won't have any failure. You need to be very specific. You need to be setting big goals. If you're not setting a goal that kind of scares you, like you're not sure how you're going to reach it, it might not be big enough. If we can all be kind of our best and be pushing and innovating, and that's why having teams that are diverse. There's a story about one of the drug busts that I had, where someone's just, multiple different people from different departments on the ship on my boarding team, and one of them, who was down in the engine room, had no business being down there. He didn't do any engineering back on the ship, but he found a huge stash of narcotics because he was thinking about it differently, and that's where I think it's important. And if you're not going after something that's going to scare you a little bit, then it's probably, I mean, there's certain things you just need to get done. Not everything needs to be this huge stratospheric goal.
Yeah.
But if you're going to set something, make it worthwhile. Make yourself feel better about it afterwards. You know, and the rest of the team, so that when you're high-fiving each other, when you've overachieved, you know, you're in a great place.
Right.
Get comfortable with being a little uncomfortable.
Completely, like all the time, because then you're in this kind of continuous state of innovation, of self-improvement. A corner of your plate needs to be set aside for continuous improvement all the time. Physical, mental, emotional, you know, relationship-wise.
That's great advice. That's great advice.
And if not, I think you end up either you're moving ahead or you're kind of stalling.
Where can people find your book? So Leadership from the Front Line. Where can people find your book?
Sure. So it's out on Amazon. If you go to Amazon and just type in Leadership from the Front Lines or type in my name, you'll get it. And there's 3 different ways to get it. There's either a hardcover, a soft cover, or the Kindle version. I think if you don't have Kindle Unlimited, you can sign up for it like free for 90 days, so you can download it, read it, and you know if you're not going to use Kindle Unlimited anymore, I think you could probably do away with it before you get charged.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the best way to do it. I've kind of closed down any other websites. There used to be leadershipfromthefrontlines.com. I just said, okay, you know, it's out there, and part of me starts to feel sometimes, if I'm talking too much about it, and I don't want it to be a shameless plug for me, because it's not.
Right. And the proceeds go to homeless veterans.
Correct. Yes. So
I buy the book.
Yeah, you know,
Help some homeless veterans. You'll learn a lot too out of this, especially if you're watching this podcast. You're already a high level on this stuff, talking about leadership, and especially the coalition between military and leadership outward.
You had asked about one leadership lesson. It's really around adaptability, I think. You need to be able to change, personally, professionally, and you're not undergoing a constant state of change. It's not that kind of tumultuous, but it's like, you know, there have been a lot of businesses here in the last 3 to 5 years, in the last year, that have completely disrupted, you know, business in general. You talk about cryptocurrency and things like that, and there's still a lot that needs to be ironed out. You know, NFTs, non-fungible tokens. You look at generative AI, right? Accenture put $3 billion into generative AI because that's what I think Bill Gates said, it's like the next fire. So you can't hang on to the old thing. You need to let go. You still have the competency, whatever you built, but you need to be able to change, adapt. And if you can't do that, then you're in a bad place. I remember when I first left active duty Coast Guard and went to General Electric, Jack Welch just passed away a little while ago. He used to say, change or die. And I thought, well, that's a little dramatic, right? Change or die.
Yeah.
But if you weren't number 1 or number 2, if your GE division wasn't number 1 or number 2 in your market, he'd cut you loose. So the portfolio at General Electric under the helm of Jack Welch was continuously changing. And so I think as the amount of information and data seems to like double, you know, I guess it doubled over 30 years and it doubled in 5, and now it seems like it's doubling every week.
Yeah.
The world's getting smaller and things are moving quickly. And you could find yourself just being passed quickly, not by people, but by kind of the course of time, if you're not continuously looking to adapt and change. It's the biggest thing in my mind.
And I think the next podcast will be about change management. And
Yeah.
we do
I was going to say, we can do a whole conversation on just AI.
Yeah.
Big time. Big time.
Craig Henzel, thank you so much for being on the show.
Absolutely.
Very
Al,
much
appreciate
so.
it.
Thanks for coming
Absolutely.
on.
Yeah.
Paul, thank you.
Hey guys, make sure you follow, like, and subscribe to Shots from the Winchester podcast. Put some comments too. Let us know what you thought about this episode. Talk to you soon.
Thanks.